Hey, what do blacksmiths, metal shoes, flat beer, and chickens have in common? Well, that would be a jousting tournament in the honor of Duke Francis III of Saxony in 1537. Actually, none of that is accurate at all. But I do know some other things that actually are accurate. And we're going to find out tonight in the next episode of Drinking Through History. Good evening, everyone. I am your host, Leif Halverson, and welcome to the next episode of Drinking Through History. As always, if you've got a beverage that you'd like to enjoy, please do so as you're enjoying the program this evening. This evening, I'm going to be enjoying out of a earthenware mug made by my friend, Mr. Gordon Lucht, a beverage. If you've got one of these, or you've got a ceramic historic one of the time frame, that would actually be a very appropriate vessel to be enjoying tonight's beverage from. And speaking of tonight, here we are in winter. And if you are on the Montana-North Dakota border like I am, you've noticed that it's doggone cold out. And for those of you who I'm friends with there in the social media lands know that I've been out pretty much every single day taking care of some things for part of my exercise routine. We've been having negative digits down into the negative 40s. I've got friends in Canada, up in the Weyburn area, that was seeing negative 50 with the wind chill area. It's been cold. Now, we've had a little bit of a warm snap, but it's starting to cool down again for us in my neck of the woods. So to kind of set the stage for what's taking place is, imagine that it's wintertime and you are traveling during colonial America time frame. Let's say that this is taking place in the 1780s or thereabouts. Post 1781, things have kind of simmered down a little bit for us as far as the excitement that's been taking place in the history of our nation. You've been riding all day. You took off in the morning, you're hungry, and you finally come on into town. Now, this is a place that you've been to before. This town, this location that you're coming into, and you're passing by a number of inns and taverns, and there's one in particular that you want to go to because, in your mind, this is the best one for you to go to this evening. You're cold, you're tired, you're hungry, and you could do with a nice stout beverage. So you go on into this inn, to this establishment, you get yourself a room, and then you immediately go on down to where the eatery location is within this inn and its tavern area. You order yourself some food, and you're going to get yourself something to drink as well. Now, two common things that would have been available and would have been fairly popular during this time frame of colonial America. One is a punch. Now, this is going to be different than the Chatham artillery punch that we've talked about in the past. This is going to be a colonial era punch. And the other one is actually what tonight's beverage actually is going to be for us, this colonial version of this beverage. So it's not going to be a colonial punch, but look forward to one of those at some point that we'll be doing, hopefully in one of the reproduction punch bowls, which are now commercially available now, which is awesome for folks like me and for you if you geek out on drinking history type of things. So you order this beverage, and it's a warm beverage. And so you watch the barkeep essentially go and put this together for you. And he's got a couple ceramic mugs, and he's putting a variety of liquids together. He's got perhaps a bottle of some kind of a sweetener. It's the house special. It's the one that they make specifically at this inn that you're checked into. And in fact, this beverage that they're making, because they make it so well, this is actually why you want to come and stay here, because you've stayed at some of the other inns and taverns in the past when you've been in the same town, but this is the place that makes the one that you are the most looking forward to seeing, which ends up playing a role historically in what's going on. So you watch as the barkeep puts a variety of different liquids in these ceramic mugs, and he ends up pouring them back and forth between each other, one being raised up and poured down into the other, and then vice versa, back and forth. And then he hands you this mug that's got a frothy top on it that's nice and warm, and you take a sip, and by golly, if you don't feel better. So what does that have to do with our four things, though, at all that we've talked about this evening that we're looking forward to connecting together? Well, what he's making is a beverage that in colonial times was called a flip. A flip is a beverage, oftentimes heated, that is churned up. It's mixed up between two vessels. In fact, they would make special ceramic or earthenware mugs for these, different than this style of one. Oftentimes they were kind of bulbous on the bottom and then went straight up at the top with a little bit. I'll have an image pop up here for you to be able to see what that type of a thing would look like inside of, check it out, we're inside the interior of a colonial era tavern here. That's pretty cool, isn't it? They would take two mugs like that, pour them back and forth to mix up this hot beverage. It would morph over time. Now this, if you're familiar with guys like, for example, Professor Jerry Thomas, who we get one of the first bar books that's worth anything in our time frame, gets released in 1862. He's got a beverage in there called the Blue Blazer, where the one side he would light on fire and pour from one mug into the other and back and forth because of the blue flame that was created. Well, this isn't the Blue Blazer. We're not playing with fire tonight, although we do need fire to warm things up and to take advantage of the delicious tastiness that comes out of it. So you've got this flip, and a flip a lot of times was made of your base level anyway. You're going to use some kind of ale, usually a strong ale. Today, if you grab like a brown beer or brown ale, a stronger one, we've used other ones as well too. We've used Belgians that we've tried this with. That's kind of your base. You're going to be adding some kind of spirit to it. Brandy would have been a very popular one, but rum would have as well. And yet, one more time, Jamaican rum, please. Surprise, surprise when it comes to me. And there was typically some kind of a sweetener in there. And that sweetener could be a variety of different things. Could be sugar. We see where it, believe it or not, could be dried pumpkin that was put into it as well. A variety of spices that would be mixed together. So one of the ways that you would get the ale warmed up, you could use a kettle, but as you're going to see popping up on your screens now, this handy device is called an ale shoe. Now they had ale shoes and they also had ale cones, and what would happen, here we are in our nice colonial tavern again, and a couple of images here, and here's another one outside of a campfire that you can do for your own enjoyment as well. The ale was actually poured into this ale shoe, set into the fire to warm up. That would then be poured into one of your ceramic mugs, and then your sweetener and your spirit, whether it be the brandy or the rum, would be put into the other one. Then it would be poured back and forth. One of the things that would end up happening as well is they would take things like cream or eggs, that's where our chicken comes in, would be added to it as well. Now, if you remember when I did the improved whiskey sour, we actually used an egg white to that, and we've done the eggnogs as well. And what happens is an egg being put into a beverage like this brings about kind of a silkiness, not necessarily a sweetness, but a silkiness to it. And especially if it's a harsher spirit that's being used, which you might notice if you're making yourself an improved whiskey sour, where perhaps the bourbon that you're using or whiskey, maybe it's not a high quality one, it's kind of harsh. This will actually kind of knock down those cutting tones. This added to the flavorfulness of the beverage. Another thing that would happen, fire irons would be put in and heated up till they were red hot, or a different device which gets called a loggerhead, made by a blacksmith. Here's an image of one here. This one actually is my loggerhead. I've got another smaller one that was made by my friend Mr. Tom Brown. These would be heated up till the end is red hot, and then after the beverage was mixed together, that loggerhead would be lowered in, sizzling and caramelizing everything that's on the inside. You would then let it cool down a little bit. They would use these ceramic mugs because it could withstand the heat and be able to enjoy your beverage without burning yourself. Now, this is a project that I got introduced to about 5 years ago or so. My friend Paul Ellenbecker. Paul Ellenbecker is a fellow living historian. We've done a fair amount of stuff together at places like Fort Union, the Turtle Mountains, and getting to hang out with him at Grand Portage National Monument as well. And we have a mutual interest in things brewed and things drank and consumed. Paul's actually the one who introduced me to this entire idea of what today, which is tonight's beverage, Colonial Flip. At a camp that we had up in the Turtle Mountains in a private area just for living historians after we're done doing all of our volunteer work at our local site, Fort Union Trading Post National Historic Site. We get together and just enjoy a weekend, just us in the woods together as a big living history family. And at one of these in the Turtle Mountains, he had a loggerhead, and I actually purchased the loggerhead that you saw earlier from him, thanks to my brother Hans. I was able to purchase that, put me together a drink, and we talked about it a little bit. Well, as time went on and drinking through history developed more and more over the past several years, you end up following some of these different historic sites that show beverages of the colonial time frame and other things like that. And I start seeing more of these recipes pop up on my screen as I'm going through social media and doing researching for what today we would call Colonial Flip. Here's a recipe that comes from 1702. I'm going to pop the image up on the screen here for you to see. And this is from James Lightbody's 1702 book titled Every Man His Own Gauger. And you can see that this is a recipe very popular that would be at a tavern for both making punch and making flip. In this particular recipe, we're seeing a flip being made this way. He's saying use 2 quarts of good ale or beer, half a pint of brandy, so this sucker is going to be stout, a little lemon juice, nutmeg, and sugar mixed together, and it's done. You can make it stronger by adding more brandy or weaker by putting additional water in it or using a small beer instead. Choice of verjuice is as good as lemons. And we find another thing that we can do to improve both our punch and the flip is through a flannel bag, straining it through a flannel bag, and it will be very clear and fine. So that's a version from 1702, and there ends up being a number of these different versions, and we've got our own version that we're getting to enjoy together as well. Paul and I have both done a fair amount of research on flips. We've seen where, in addition to all of those different things that are being used, a variety of spices, we see where eggs are being put in, we see where cream's being put in, and we find where both are being put in as well. The version that we're going to use tonight, you can use one, the other, or both, because we've tried all 3 of those, and it really depends on what your preference is. Let's start with our sweetener, because it's going to be beneficial for you to make a batch of this up so you can make several batches of this at home or in the field, all right? And so this is the syrup, the sweetener. We're going to have it all together in a syrup, and this is the recipe for going about making that I've been using, that you can go ahead and tweak as you want to, again, based upon what your tastes are, and it's perfectly fine if you do that. So here's the base model for that. I'm going to have the instructions pop up on the screen here for us. To make the syrup, start with 1 cup of brown sugar. You're going to use a half cup of water. You can grate down 1/4 of a nutmeg. If you don't have whole nutmeg and you've just got ground nutmeg, go ahead and toss in half a teaspoon of that. You're going to put in 1 cinnamon stick, and you're going to put in 2 cloves. All right. You're going to warm that up on the stove. You're going to mix it up a little bit, bring it to a boil, and then immediately let it cool. Make sure that your brown sugar is dissolved all the way. Let that cool down, and you're going to transfer that into another vessel that you're going to save for later. So this is going to be the sweetener that you're going to use when you go to make your flip. Okay. Now, for the drink itself, you're going to need 1 bottle of your strong beer of choice. Brown beer or brown ale would be very appropriate for this. We've used other strong beers as well too. One of the versions that Paul and I did, we used a Belgian ale, and that thing was phenomenal. We really enjoyed using a Belgian ale with that. For your spirit, if you're going to be using rum, again, a Jamaican rum, a dark one or a golden rum would be very good choices. But if you want to try with other historic-based rums, go for it. Go ahead and try them out. See what you think, whatever your preference is. I'm inclined to be using a Jamaican rum, Appleton Estate, surprise, surprise, or some kind of dark Jamaican rum as well. Our sweetener, we've already got fixed up that we've made on the stove ahead of time. So we've got that bottled set off to the side. And then we got a couple of adjuncts. We're going to use 1 egg, and we're going to use some cream as well. Now, the images that you're going to see that I've been using as far as metering things out, I've actually got a little wee cup, kind of like a Jack or a Jill cup that was put together by my friend, Mr. Paul Cummings. He's the one that actually made the ale shoe that you've seen pictures of as well, too. And right below the rim of the top of the wee cup there is approximately 2 ounces. So we're going to put in about 2 ounces of our sweetener syrup, and we're going to put in about 2 ounces of our cream along with our egg, but you can choose just one or you can choose just the other. When it's all said and done, a very common thing during colonial time frame in America is you can grate nutmeg on top of that. So if you're making this at home, we can make this on the stovetop. You don't have to have an ale shoe if you want to make this. It's perfectly all right. So what you're going to do is on the stove, you're going to take a saucepan or a small kettle, and you're going to pour in your bottle of beer. And just do it from some height. Let it foam up all the way because we don't need this carbonated. Flatter might actually end up working out for you a little bit better. So if you want to ahead of time, you can pop the top on your favorite bottle of strong beer that you're going to be using, or just pour it in and just let it sit for a while before you begin making it. So on the stove top, you're going to go ahead and pour in your 12 ounces of your beer of choice that you're going to be using tonight. Warm that up on the stove, and you're going to warm this up until it begins to steam but not boil. Because if you bring it to a boil, you actually wipe out all of the alcohol content and begin to change the flavor profile of that beer that you're going to want to enjoy in our flip this night. You're also going to need 2 large glasses or mugs that you're going to be pouring the things back and forth between. Once you've got your beer heated up, put that off to the side. In one of the mugs, you're going to put in your 2 ounces of your flavored syrup, sweetened or spiced syrup that we've put together, and you're going to put in your rum as well, or brandy if you're choosing to use brandy, and you're going to crack an egg in there as well, and you're going to mix that up, kind of get it whipped up in there. Then from your saucepan where you've got your heated up ale, you're going to pour that into your other mug, and now we're going to mix the two together. A cooking technique when working with eggs in different dishes is called tempering. And what we do with tempering is we take some of the hot stuff, a little bit of it, into the egg mixture to raise the temperature up some and mix it around a little bit. And what that does is it tempers the egg. It helps warm it up, helps prevent it from becoming essentially scrambled. Once you've done that, then take your 2 vessels, pour the rest of your ale from the one mug into the one containing your spirit and the syrup and the egg, and then you're going to pour them back and forth, and you can have fun with the height as you mix those back and forth. And once it's all mixed up, go ahead and grate your nutmeg on top, and you'll be able to have a sip of that and enjoy this nice, warm Colonial Flip that you've got made together. So you don't have to have an ale shoe, and you don't have to have a loggerhead to make this at home. You can make it right on the stove. You are going to need 2 large mugs or glasses. The ones that you saw on my stove here, these are actually Oktoberfest glasses that hold 1 liter each. We obviously aren't using 1 liter worth of stuff, but they worked out fairly well for me to make mixing these. Or you can mix them by hand in 1 mug if you want to do that. That'll work out for you too, and you're still going to be able to enjoy Colonial Flip. Now, if you're brave and enterprising, and honestly, this isn't too difficult of a thing to do, if you got yourself a loggerhead, you can heat that up using, if you've got, one of your butane torches that you would use for doing soldering work on copper work or different things like that. Or if you've got yourself a backyard fire pit or something like that, go ahead and get a fire going, stick that iron in there, wait till it's red hot, and after you have mixed the flip together with the mug, you're going to take that loggerhead and drop that down in there, or not drop it, you're going to lower it down in there slowly and kind of mix it around, and then go ahead and pull it out. A thing to keep in mind if you are using eggs in this, if you hold that loggerhead in there for a longer period of time, you're going to end up with some scrambled eggs in there. That's just what ends up happening if you hold it in there a long time. Now, you've already got it warmed up to an extent because you've heated up your beer on your stovetop or over your fire or using your ale shoe, so you don't have to hold that loggerhead in there as long of a time to be able to get it warmed up and up to temperature. So if you have that in there for a little while, what's going to happen is with that red hot loggerhead that's going in there, it's going to caramelize the sugars and impart a slightly different caramelized type of a flavor to your flip. Now, if you really want to go all out, find yourself a nice little Colonial tavern. We've got some images of here. Go on over to where the fireplace is. Go ahead and pour your beer into that ale shoe and stick the end in there. Now, a thing to think of, if this is the first time that you've done anything like this and you're using an ale shoe, wherever you've got a seam, make sure that you've got liquid covering that seam, because if you don't, the heat from the fire will cause that solder to run, and now your ale shoe is falling apart and no one's having any fun because no one's getting to drink Colonial Flip. At the same time, go ahead and have your loggerhead stuck in there on the side. Once it's beginning to steam, like it does, not boiling, but once it's beginning to steam, take that out, pour it into one of your ceramic mugs, and the other one have your spirit. You've got your rum, you've got your cream, and you've got your egg. You're gonna mix those back and forth, bring your loggerhead over, lower it in, let it simmer up, and then enjoy it with all the friends that you've got there in the tavern. Now, honestly, Colonial Flip is something that you should share with folks. I mean, it was a tavern drink, for pity's sakes. So it's what a lot of people were enjoying. So if you got friends around you, this is a perfect one to do at some kind of a winter doings, especially if you've got access to a Colonial tavern like we did, although you might not have access to that. You might be out in the woods, or it might be a history gathering at someone's house. Definitely make this, share it with people. It's meant to be enjoyed. And that's one of my favorite things that we got to do. Paul and I have wanted to do this and kind of do it right. And so we were just completely, it was amazing to be able to make Colonial Flip in a reproduction Colonial tavern that we got to share with a number of our history friends in the early part of the tail end of 2024 before we got into 2025. I'm not going to share the location. Just know it was awesome, and we had a good time with that. Now, remember, we talked about how the reason why you went to this particular establishment to spend the evening is because you've stayed at the other ones before, and this is the one that you want to come to the most because you've enjoyed it the most. Interesting thing about this, Flip was kind of a house beverage. Each one kind of had its own way of making it. We've got a whole bunch of options for how we can use our sweeteners. Say that you're making the syrup that we talked about making. You could throw allspice in there if you want to. You can throw anise seeds or anise stars in there. You can tweak it the way that you want. And these different taverns and inns would do that. Some of them, believe it or not, you would pay more for a flip than what you actually would for the lodging at that establishment. And so some people, if you were really into flip, would choose the establishment that they were staying at based upon how tasty to them that flip was. So flip was one of those things that you can have a house recipe, and it would vary from tavern to tavern. So definitely feel free to go and tweak that syrup flavor the way that you want to, using the spices that you want to use. Have your beer of choice that you want to make. Come up with your own house flip, because that actually is very appropriate to do with this beverage. So Colonial Flip is a wonderful beverage for us to be enjoying as not just historians, but friends and neighbors as well in the cold winter months like this. Make some for the next gathering that you've got with some friends, and especially if you've got some winter doings, get together with history friends, for sure make this and have fun with it. Change up the beer of choice that you want to use. Go ahead and mess with those different spices and seasonings that you've got inside of the syrup, because remember, all of those taverns had their own different one. So go ahead and make it unique to you. That was the Colonial thing to do. Everybody, thanks for hanging out with me this evening, and I hope that you're able to enjoy this, perhaps in some winter camp or some winter gathering with different friends of yours. Thanks for hanging out with me this evening, and I hope that you can enjoy this with friends, because life is always better when we history together. As always, I'm Leif Halverson, and I look forward to the next time together we can enjoy Drinking Through History.